you for having us here. Very happy to be with you. I'm Colin O'Malley, the founder of Lucid. As Suzanne mentioned, we provide consulting and DPO services to technology companies and market. We're here to talk about self-regulation, and we have an excellent panel to talk through some of the issues and some of the challenges and also what's in store for self-regulation. I'll introduce the panel quickly here. We have Jules Kendrick from the Trustworthy Accountability Group, TAG, Orla Twalmy, the Advertising Standards Authority for Ireland, ASAI, Minon Wagner from the IB Europe, and Alex Cohn from the IB Tech Lab. So just a bit of context here. We continue to operate in a challenging and fluid regulatory environment with many companies unclear about what is safe, responsible, and legal, and even the most basic, of digital media business models. Advocates continue to raise broad concerns about digital advertising, and regulators are mounting cookie sweeps, challenging the transparency and consent framework, while also complementing the TCF, raising Schrems II export requirements, and increasing fines by orders of magnitude. As we head towards 2022, we also have a sense that we are entering into a critical next phase of the GDPR era. Following the onset of GDPR in 2018, DPAs were largely building their infrastructure, declaring priorities and level setting against each other. But we have a sense now, as stakes rise and DPAs clarify their positions with meaningful enforcement, that we are about to find out the full meaning of the GDPR on the ground. So to kick us off, Jules Kendrick from TAG, can you help us understand what some of the self-reg successes are for industry to date as of 2021?
Sure, thanks, Colin. So for those of you that don't know, and hopefully a lot of you do, TAG, the Trustworthy Accountability Group, is a global not-for-profit set up by the industry for the industry to help eliminate fraudulent traffic, promote brand safety, and share threat intelligence, and prevent malvertising across the digital supply chain. So when we look at the kind of success, if you look at TAG's membership base, over 700 members in the TAG community from right across the globe, over 250 of those auditing to those standards. So that covers the agencies, DSPs, SSPs, platforms, vendors, publishers. And really it's a sort of great example of our industry, the digital ad industry, working together, defining challenges and addressing them through self-regulation, and partnerships that we have with the likes of IAB Ireland, using their gold standard to promote TAG brand safety certified and ensuring their market is adhering to that standard, is really again an example of the collaboration that's required to enable us to work towards addressing challenges. A key thing also to mention here when we talk about self-regulation and standards is that this isn't marking our own homework. These standards are audited by independent validators. So that's ensuring that their processes and practices that they're actually doing them. They're not just saying that they are, they're being held accountable from that. So that kind of support that we get from IAB Ireland really means that we can really continue to build on that success and show that we as an industry can regulate in, specifically for TAG, the areas that I discussed, but, it can be done elsewhere. It also ensures that TAG standards ensure that brands are not funding the bad actors, be that the criminals or sites peddling misinformation, disinformation, which means we cut the flow of money to these sites that obviously not only protect ad budgets, but also protect consumers, which is ultimately what our regulators, policymakers are interested in, protecting the consumer, and our standards enable us to do that.
Rachel, thank you. Alex Cohn, from the Tech Lab point of view.
Yeah, so quick apologies for the sound in the background. I'm going to move after this question. So I think, honestly, I view what Tech Lab does as a self-regulatory enabler, in the sense that we're defining tech standards that in some cases are directly translatable into self-regulatory programs, like what we've done in supporting the tech spec for the TCF. And that's like, Ninon's going to talk more about that, but that's a clear success in terms of just adoption and bringing lots of different interests together. But the other thing I want to highlight in terms of just what what I think is a success that may go unnoticed is less connected directly to any one self-regulatory program, but I think over time will be connected to more, which is the supply chain transparency work that we're doing. I think from a data protection perspective, to get your house in order to even want to deliver any privacy to anyone, like understanding the supply chain and having transparency into who is in the supply chain, who should be and who shouldn't be, is so critical. And my thinking is that that's one of the bigger successes that's perhaps a little less noticed, but I think will become a critical piece of the overall self-regulatory landscape, not just in Europe, but globally going forward.
For sure. Thank you, Alex. Inon from the IBEU.
Yes, so as Alex said, I'm going to talk about the TCF. So with the switch over to TCF version 2 last year, in response to feedback from the market, but also DPAs, the adoption of TCF across GDPR countries has grown even stronger, which is a great outcome. So in terms of participating companies, we have no more than 750 vendors. And also 120 consent management platform. The number is still increasing, and I think that vendors currently observe between 80 to 90% of ad requests coming with a TC string, which represents user choices obtained via TCF. So this is a great outcome. We observe a clear correlation as well between TCF adoption and local DPA engagement. Which is a clear sign that the industry is invested in building really a common approach to comply with the requirements of the regulators. And another important milestone for TCF is the launch of the vendor compliance program this month that aims to ensure that user choices are respected by vendors.
So that's excellent, thank you. And quite a collection of programs and adoption that's taken a lot of work from people here on the panel and around the industry. And I guess the question is, given the challenges that I laid out at the outset and the accomplishments so far of self-regulation, where effectively are we at? We have a solid foundation to build on and protect the industry as we go forward. Orla?
Thanks, Colin. And I think my perspective might be slightly different to the other speakers, but nevertheless, you know, ASAI is the ad self-regulator in Ireland. And when I was looking at today's theme of trust and confidence and reflecting on ASAI's purpose and role, building and maintaining trust in advertising is part of what ASAI does. Our mission is to ensure the highest standards of advertising, and that relates to all commercial advertising in all media in our remit. And high standards, I strongly believe, that meet the needs and expectations of society and industry do foster trust in advertising. As we know, the advertising industry is really dynamic. It's an innovative industry, and the pace of change over the years has only increased. And as an effective regulator, ASAI must ensure that its remit continually evolves as new forms of advertising, new communication channels are developed. And that's the approach that ASAI has taken during its 40 years existence, an iterative approach to the rules, the remit, and the interpretation. And I'm just going to talk briefly about two of the examples that show how we've responded to societal and industry needs. Influencer marketing, as we all know, is a significant trend in the advertising ecosystem, and it's an area where our approach is clearly evident and successful. ASAI's approach to determining when influencer created or user created content is advertising is very, very broad. Our view is that when an individual content creator is under obligation to follow direction and is recompensed, paid or paid in kind, then the material they create is advertising. And this raises a key question, and it relates to trust. And trust is vital for us all. We need to trust the messages we see. We need to trust the companies we do business with, and they need us to trust them. And a key element in trust is transparency, which is why one of the rules that's been in the ASAI code for 40 years is, if it's an ad, make it clear. With traditional ads, we all know how to recognize them, but influencer content can be a mix. And because of that, it's incredibly important that when influencer content is advertising, that it is identified clearly and from the beginning. And so ASCI has done a lot of work on this over the last number of years because it was such a new area. So we've issued guidance notes, we've held events, and we've also investigated ads, and our complaints committee have adjudicated on advertising, finding a lack of disclosure or hidden disclosure to be a breach of the code. And another more recent example of where we have moved to address societal concerns is the recent adoption into the ASCI code and guidance of restrictions for high fat, salt and sugar product ads in print, outdoor cinema and digital. And IAB Ireland was very supportive of our approach in this area, and we're grateful for that. ASCI was involved in the development of the rules, which were drawn up by the Department of Health and the advertising industry, and we've decided to bring them into our code so that we could provide a regulatory solution to their implementation. And when we're talking about online, it obviously brings its own challenges, not least because of the sheer scale of it. And one area that we will be looking to develop is using digital tech tools to monitor online and building on the developments in other self-regulatory organisations. When we're looking at regulation, whether it's soft law as in self-regulation or hard law as in state regulation, has a number of key criteria. For it to be effective, there must be a set of rules that are broadly accepted by stakeholders. For ad self-regulation, this means all areas of the advertising ecosystem, consumers and society, and policymakers. It doesn't mean that every decision has to have unanimous agreement, but it does mean that the concept of the rules is accepted. Secondly, there must be an independent process to oversee the implementation of the rules. And thirdly, there must be an independent adjudication or monitoring process, which has been touched upon today as well. And in Irish ad self-regulation, we have a code that is widely consulted on, an organisation that is funded by the industry but operates separately from it, an independent complaints committee who decide whether advertising breaches the code. I think just in closing, I would talk about that a number of years ago, the Consumer Protection Directorate in the European Commission looked at advertising self-regulation and its place in the regulatory mix. And they commented that it's not so much a debate about self-regulation against hard law, but rather a debate about how law and self-regulation can and should react in modern Europe. So it doesn't have to be an either-or situation, but effective self-regulation can provide a service to society at no cost to the state. It can be built on the technical expertise of the relevant industry. And when an independent adjudication or monitoring process is included, it provides comfort on the robustness of the process. Society, I think, is right to expect that self-regulatory propositions are effective, robust, and independent in their decision-making. But I think they should also expect that the state would utilize such systems for the benefit of society, consumers, industry, and the state. And that's where I would consider that the ASCI position would be at the moment on this.
That's excellent, Orla. Thank you. Yep. You know, are the waters safe? What's your perspective from the IAB?
So no, I don't think that the water are safe. Of course, when it comes to privacy, the industry is still under lots of scrutiny by regulators and civil society organizations. There remain lots of concern as to whether users' privacy choices are abided with by companies operating in the ecosystem. And what has been as well quite a challenge in making TCF evolve is the uncertainties and discrepancies in GDPR interpretation by DPAs. So this remains a pain point to make TCF simple and pan-European. The approach right now has been to accommodate regional differences by providing the highest degree of flexibility. For example, when it comes to available legal basis or certain disclosure requirements. And what this has already been raised in the chat, the simplification is important to strengthen the framework, but this can only be done according to regulators' guidance and case law. So this really is an incremental process, and it's not over.
Thank you. Alex, from your perspective, are we working from a solid foundation here going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think I will say that what I saw, building off of Ninon, I know she said no in terms of the waters being safe. I think what we saw, at least, and I've been following the chat too, about the Belgian DPA sort of questions into TCF. In terms of a positive viewpoint on the TCF, like it represents hundreds of companies coming together across publishing, ad tech, agencies. Advertisers were a little late to the table on that, but I think they've been leaning into more and more. And like, as someone who was there as that got created, to see industry come together around really hard issues, especially as, you know, there wasn't yet case law to sort of reference and you know, make positions. So I think like we've got a strong foundation of collaboration and being able to show that if we will put our weapons down and come together as an industry, like we can do a lot. It's not perfect, as sort of the chat implies, but it's like, what else? Like, how? Like, good luck in getting, you know, 300 organizations to come together again to do something that big. So that to me is a solid foundation. Like, aside from just the policy, just the fact that we got folks to come together. I think what's making things shaky and the waters maybe a little unsafe is that, you know, to some degree, platforms are taking sort of self-regulatory matters into their own hands in the sense that they're going further than quite a bit further than regulations require in terms of just like locking down data to themselves. So I think that's going to make things really hard going forward to sort of come together as the like more open industry as platforms sort of make their own decisions on how to move forward, particularly in the realm of privacy and data protection. So it's kind of mixed, I guess. Some strong foundations with some serious headwinds.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Yep. You know, we've a lot of ground to cover here, and we could certainly talk about this for the full day if we had the time allotment. I want to skip over some of the content that we were hoping to get to, but you know, on this waters safe question, and in particular, looking at evidence that we have to support the view, and in light of some of the chat conversation that we've been having, you know, is there anything else you want to add, just in terms of, you know, evidence to support a sense that the waters are safe? Not that you said that they were clearly safe, but you know, if you're positioning this from, you know, the positive point of view, or just looking to justify that the presence of folks in market using sort of TCF as a self-regulatory model, where do you think we are?
Well, as Alex said, I think that it's really positive, the number of companies that are investing in building TCF and making TCF evolve. So this is, of course, one of the reasons that the water, well, we have a solid foundation. The other thing that we are working on is to improve accountability for TCF participants. So this is definitely one of the big things. We have been launching the vendor compliance program. I think that one of the concerns from DPA and consumer organizations that really needs to be addressed is the current lack of auditability in the supply chain. So we want to help address this issue. The compliance program will enable scalable auditing of vendors to verify that they comply with the TCF policy requirements that are drawn from the Privacy Directive and the GDPR. So specifically to make sure that user choices are abided with and forwarded faithfully in the supply chain. We definitely want to strengthen and expand this program to encompass additional requirements because it will result in better consumer protection and also legal certainty for participants.
Yeah, thank you. So last question here, and it's just looking forward over the next 6 months in particular, you know, providing as much as we can in the way of specifics. We've talked about background, foundation, and just sort of current state. But what does self-regulation need to accomplish over the next 6 months to begin to address some of the challenges that we've been talking through here? You know, is there anything you want to add?
Yes, so as I just said, I think that auditability is a big thing. Another challenge is the deprecation of third-party cookies by Chrome, which implies structural changes in the mean of the data processing. So the e-privacy directive and the GDPR are technology neutral, which means that they apply irrespective that you access data from a first or third party cookie or from a web browser API, and irrespective that you process probabilistic IDs, deterministic IDs, or even simply IP addresses. So in that sense, it is really important that TCF support the transition to this post third party cookie era. There are already lots of alternatives out there in the market that have already adopt TCF or interoperate with TCF, but we are working on making sure that this standard remains well tech neutral and support compliance for any kind of new addressability solutions.
Yeah. Okay. Alex, if anything to add over the next 6 months, what should we be focusing on?
Yeah, a +1 on accountability sort of tech, meaning like tech that helps enable like groups like TAG to continue their efforts, like I think is huge. Another thing, just to add something that isn't a +1 to Ninon, is we're in the process of going to I think public comment as Tech Lab with what I would call like a signal integrity proposal, meaning like how can ad signals in the ecosystem be encrypted in a way that you know that they're valid, like that they're not being sort of created fraudulently, and B, like you know where they're coming from and who's on the other side. That's sort of an update to our ads.cert work that we kicked off in I think 2017. It's gotten a refresh and it's got some big sort of companies behind it. So I'm, again, like it's not the star of the show right now. I think the star of the show are the things that you've heard from the panelists that are represented here in terms of what's going on with TCF, what's going on with TAG and fraud prevention. I think enabling all that going forward will be standards around, encryption and companies getting on board with that. And that's something that we're leaning pretty heavily into. So that's a thing that I would recommend that folks, tuning in here, like learn more about and think more about how that might impact your organizations. But I think that's somewhere we have to go.
That's great. Thank you, Alex. All right. Well, unfortunately, I think we're at time, but everyone on the panel, thank you so much for all of your efforts here. A lot of work behind us, a lot of work still remains, of course. And Suzanne, I think we'll bring the microphone back to you.
Thank you so much, and apologies, we really are having a whistle-stop tour of all the various subjects. This is our first Digital Trust forum. We will commit to having another, I think, in the next 6 months, because we wanted to give you a quick overview